Excuse me, everyone. Being mindful of everybody's time, being that it's 6 o'clock. I call to order City of Newburgh Budget Committee meeting. I will now call to order the city meeting of April, blah, blah, blah. I will now call to order the City of Newburgh Budget Committee meeting for April 22nd, 2025. Rachel, will you please conduct roll call?
Certainly. Ned Knight.
Here.
Alex Nichols.
Here.
Theodora Bora.
Here.
Austin Crackraft.
Here.
Raquel Pellegrino de Brito.
Here.
Judy Brown.
Here.
And Elias is absent. And Mayor Rosacker.
Here.
Counselor Turgeson.
Here.
Counselor Carmen.
Here.
Counselor Kilberg.
Here.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman.
Here.
Counselor McBride.
Here.
And Counselor Wheatley.
Here.
Thank you.
Now we'll stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I will now open the meeting for public comments. Rachel, did we receive any public comments?
Not this evening.
Okay, I will now close the public comment portion of the meeting. I will now turn it over to staff for the budget presentation.
All right, I'm on. So thank you, everybody, for coming. This is our first budget meeting tonight. This will be the financial forecast, and then I'll briefly go over what to expect for the biennial budget that is upcoming. I know we had council last night, so I'll try and keep this brief, and I think we'll be able to get through this pretty quickly. Assuming the clicker works, which it doesn't. No. Okay, there we go. Did you click that or did I click it? Oh, well, we'll see. All right, so tonight on the agenda, we're gonna go over what's new at Newburgh, some of our spending priorities at the city, the position vacancies and FTE changes we've had, how the city council goals are tied to the upcoming budget, some issues to consider that we have in the future, some of the common assumptions I use throughout the financial forecast. Then we'll get into the actual financial forecast, and then just a little overview on the biennial budget and the budget committee schedule. Nope, you'll have to click it for me, I think. Unless one of you guys can figure out the clicker for me. Did it work? No. Oh.
Bottom arrow there.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, let's see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, try the mouse. Yep, there we go.
All right, we're rolling. I promise I was clicking down, but okay. All right, so what's new for Newburgh? As you probably have all heard, the City Hall flood is finally over. I believe we're still tallying our total loss on this, but I believe the project was about 1.2 million for that flood, and insurance, I believe, is covering about 700,000. So we paid about $500,000 out of pocket from the flood, which was a pretty big chunk of money from all of that. But we're glad to finally be back in City Hall, and I believe we're still looking at some FEMA reimbursements for potentially redoing the roof and hopefully the windows. So we'll see what comes of that. NURA, our urban renewal agency, is going to begin its first project in the biennium. So that's very exciting. We're looking at doing River Street, which is one of the worst cities we have in Newburgh. So that's very exciting for us to get started on finally. The debt reduction plan is still underway, which I'm going to talk about later. The red light camera project is gonna be coming back. So we had a few hiccups with that the first time around. We have an RFP that's scheduled to end hopefully, I think, this week. And then we're looking at getting a new company on board, and hopefully we'll have those cameras up and running again hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, if not beginning of next fiscal year. So the summertime. ARPA is finally concluded, so that will be a budget or a fund that you won't see in the budget this year. It'll be in the discontinued section. So we're glad to have finally spent all of those funds and be done with that project after many years. The tough road repairs, we have lots of those in the works. I believe the next one we have on the docket is Mountain View. So we'll be doing lots of work on Mountain View starting in May. And then obviously the biennial budget. Some position vacancies we have at the city right now. We have 3 vacancies for Utility Tech 1, and then also 3 vacancies in Public Works also for Utility Tech 2. We've just had a lot of turnover in Public Works recently, so we're hoping to fill those positions quickly and get everybody fully staffed again. We still have a dispatch position open as well. And then just today, we posted our city technology manager also, so that is another vacant position that didn't quite make the slide on here. And then I wanted to go over the FTE changes that we've had from this year to next year's biennium budget that you're going to see presented. So this year we've added about 0.5 FTE of library on-call hours. This was through just various positions that we've added, just additional hours for the library, which is added to about 0.5 FTE in total for that. And then some of the other adds are in place of cuts that we've done. So the engineering project manager that we added was in lieu of the senior engineer that we cut. Then the operations supervisor that we added, when he moved up to that position, he was an operator 3. So we chose not to refill that position when he moved up to the operations supervisor. The digital archivist was in place of the engineering admin assistant. So that was just a repurposed FTE. And the system administrator was also a repurposed FTE instead of the network engineer. And then we also cut the facility supervisor when that person left the city. And then when the wastewater superintendent retired, we merged the water and wastewater superintendent positions into 1 FTE. So that was also a reduction there. And then for the biennium that we have upcoming, we've added 1 new entry-level police officer. So this was part of our succession planning that we're doing for the police force. We have done an analysis, and it looks like about 1/3 of our police officers are going to retire in around 5 to 6 years. And it takes around 18 to 24 months to get officers onboarded and able to fill a slot on patrol. So we're trying to really get ahead of this so that we're not, at a loss with all our police officers all at once. So we're trying to add that in now, one FTE now, and then we're looking at doing that in the forecast later that you'll see. And then we also have some changes here with the HR manager. So Allison has been our interim HR manager for several years, and she's been working out of class as the HR specialist, HR project specialist. And she's looking to finally cut down her hours. So we're going to actually need to do a recruitment this time for an HR manager, which we've had, I believe, 4 unsuccessful recruitments for this. So we have some extra money in that budget for a recruitment, for a recruiting firm to help us. So we're hoping to be able to fill this position. And then also with her leaving and reducing her hours there, we're also hoping to add another HR generalist just because of the workload that's expected in HR from that. And then of course the cuts are reducing her hours down to 10 hours a week. So the spending priorities for Newburgh, these really haven't changed over the last several years. We're still trying to preserve all of our resources for a status quo budget just because we have a lot of upcoming capital projects that we're working on doing. So we're just trying to keep things status quo and maintain as much of our resources as possible. And then, of course, aligning our spending with council goals. And then fixing and maintaining roads and sidewalks, which you'll see with our TUF projects and with River Street getting started. And then our capital outlay rollovers, we're continuing to plan for our future purchases and hoping to get ahead of those before it's a giant purchase that we have to make. And then, of course, the debt reduction. Which, speaking of debt reduction, I'll go into that plan. So we had a few hiccups this year with this where we did not get a payment from the school district for the SRO, which is earmarked for debt reduction. The Butler property is still pending a sale, so I believe are still on plan for this. So in the budget, we are assuming these debt reduction revenue elements are going to happen. So we have a new SRO contract signed with the school district. So we are expecting that revenue to come. And so we've earmarked that specifically for debt reduction. And the Butler property, we do have an offer and we are, hoping that will sell in the next fiscal year. So we've put an amount down that we hope it will sell for. The red light cameras, we budgeted $250,000. I think that's very possible after seeing our citation numbers from the first go around of the cameras. I think that's a very possible revenue number that we could achieve, maybe even more. And then we just have another miscellaneous property sale or potentially more revenue from the cameras to make up the difference for the debt payment, which will be a little bit over $1 million without the interest that we have left to pay. So I think we can very easily get there with these debt reduction revenue elements. Yes. So in the budget, we have prepared the budget, assuming these revenue elements are going to come through. And we have budgeted for the debt to be paid off at the end of FY 25-26. And at the beginning of 26-27, we are removing the communication officer fee from the municipal billing statement. And then those two dispatchers who are paid for by that fee will move to the general fund. And so you will see that in the forecast and in the budget that's being presented. We are assuming all of these things are going to happen. Yeah. And no. FY 20, did you say FY 27? Yes. 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 So yes, please.
So, just to be clear, we thought we would be further along than we are right now, and these things you just saw in the preceding slide have to happen. And if they don't happen, we're going to miss the mark. That's where we're at.
But I think it's still very possible, which is why we put it in the budget, because assuming those revenue items come through, which I think very possibly could happen, this plan could work where we reduce the fee off the bill beginning July 1, 26, which will be the beginning of the second part of the biennium. So you'll see that.
Do you mind if I ask a
Of course,
question?
please.
You mentioned hiccups, so we can say that some of the things that happened right now are hiccups, and mitigating risks is about knowing what they are. So what could be some potential hiccups?
If the Butler property sale doesn't go through, for example, that could be a hiccup because that's a key part of the debt reduction.
Okay.
Let's say we can't get the new camera company up and running. We believe that we've fixed a lot of those hiccups from the first time around, and we put a lot of those into the RFP for the second time because we're much smarter now. Much smarter and wiser now.
Experience.
Yes.
I understand. So the things that happened that did not let us get there are the things that, because they are still unresolved, could still trip us. Got it.
So the camera company was utterly unable to carry out its contracted duty. They were unable to transfer the data that we needed transferred for the citations They were unable to print citations that didn't say the wrong jurisdiction on them. They were unable to
Yes.
provide us with customer service support that didn't answer us, hello, Multnomah County. And they were unable to resolve all of those things over months and months until they got a 30-day cure period. Now, they promised us the world when they signed the contract. So we're going to try a different company, and we hope we do not have a repeat. We've given even more information on the front end. If you go to the page that the RFP is on, we've even included the XML file on the front end to invite bidders to play with the file structure even before the contract is signed.
Yeah, and we've included what our citations should look like, what our court expects them to look like, so that there's no confusion this time as to what the file import needs to look like and what the citations need to look like for us and for citizens. So we're hoping to get ahead of that. But, and for the school resource officer, of course, there was no way for us to have known about the school district's budgetary problems at that time. So we don't foresee that in the future again, but I mean, who knows? So yeah, you're right. Some of the same hiccups could still be there, but we are hopeful it's not. Yeah. And then here are the new city council goals. They met again earlier this year and reevaluated the goals and added on to them. So I'm going to go through the council goals and how the budget and the city are addressing some of these goals. Goal 1, to create and maintain a high level of customer service. Objective 1, departments are working on individual customer service manuals to roll up by the end of July 26. All of the departments in the city are working on our own individual customer service manuals. Some of these are more public facing, like utility billing or court or community development. Some of them are as simple as internal documents, like how finance works with other departments or how IT works with other departments and helps service those support calls. So we're working on getting those rolled out as part of this customer service goal. And then objective 2, to streamline the process for issuing building permits. Building and planning just went live with OpenGov in April. So hopefully that will continue to make the process for building permits smooth and improve the whole process for everybody. Oops. Got a little excited there. Goal 2, identify industrial land and attract employers to encourage family wage jobs. To bring land into the urban growth boundary. In the professional services budget in the planning department, there is money for an urban growth boundary expansion consultant and an economics opportunities analysis appeals consultant that is in the budget. Goal 3, enhance community safety. For objective 1, to work with Newburgh School District to provide a school resource officer. Like I just mentioned, a new contract has been signed and that's resumed again. Of course, our services never stopped, but we do have a new contract signed with the new school administration for this. And then objective 2, install red light cameras and speed cameras. Again, I kind of talked about this, but the city is starting over on this and we're hoping to have the new cameras starting early summer. Goal 4, create and maintain a high level of transparency with our residents. Expand the community outreach in regards to the regular city events. We have worked on expanding and being more proactive with our communication and adding to our new website and our social media accounts. And then for objective 2, develop new streamlined council rules and institutionalize our administrative enhancements. We have new council rules being developed by Rachel over there. So you'll see that soon. Goal 5, implement a careful and prudent fiscal policy. For objective 1, to begin reducing and eventually eliminating the city's debt. Again, the debt reduction plan, we're still moving forward with that. For objective 2, to reduce elements of the municipal billing statement. We are assuming the debt reduction plan is going to be successful and we're moving forward to hopefully remove that communication officer fee beginning July 1, 2026. And then for objective 4, ensure that the city has a long-term financial plan. The financial forecast is expanded to 4 years to align with the new biennial budget process. For goal 6, revitalize and beautify the appearance and utility of Newburgh's downtown area. Objective 1, in partnership with NDC, seek funding sources to implement and maintain street program. City Council has just changed the split of TLT to allow NDC to begin receiving a portion of that, so that will help with that allocation. And beginning July 1, 2025, the city's hired a landscaping contract to help focus on keeping up the appearance of city, especially the downtown corridor, because we know that's an area that really needs some help in that area. And then for goal 7, to preserve the balance between the needs of tourism industry and preserving character of our town. The city has a digital archivist as a resource for nonprofits and small businesses to help them apply for grants. Okay, I wanted to talk next about upcoming issues that we have to consider. And my favorite topic, of course, is PERS. For those who haven't heard, PERS has a $30 billion shortfall, which only affects all of us. Yeah, it's quite a lot. And it keeps getting worse every year. So yes, please. No. That's a whole separate. Yes. Yep. So this is statewide for PERS with the $30 billion shortfall. There's a lot of reasons why they get there, but the little dollar image is a little out of date, but basically the employees have a fixed contribution rate of 6% that they contribute. Then the rest of it is made up by investment earnings and employer contributions. So as we know, the market really hasn't been performing as we all hoped. The actuary has a 6.9% assumed rate of return, and it has not met that assumed rate of return for the last 3 years. So when it doesn't meet that, then the only other way to make up the money is to have the employer pay it. So that's why rates continue to go up and up and up. So this meme was just too perfect because I always talk about how actuaries are just like the weatherman because they are just never right unless they are right. And one of the things that got a lot of people wrong this year were the advisory rates that came out from PERS were vastly wrong. And for us, it was almost double that, which you can see the impact for us was almost $1.5 million, which that's not nothing. I mean, we were very lucky that we have the money and we were able to sustain this. But, you know, if you look at a school district's budget, for example, where 85% of their expenditures are personnel, that's a huge hit for them. So, yeah, I mean, and the rates are probably just going to continue going up because PERS doesn't have a solution for their $30 billion shortfall. You can see Newburgh's portion of that unfunded actuarial liability is $14 million, which has increased $2 million since the last 2 years. So that is not great for us either. Moving on to our Newburgh pension plan, the NERPS plan, as we call it. You can see our rates for that are very different from PERS. So it's almost 61% of someone's payroll costs. So, and that is mostly because we don't have a lot of employees anymore in this plan. So at some point, we're going to have to look at this as just a lump sum that we pay. Because as more people retire, those positions become PERS positions, and then we pay PERS, but then we have to continue paying this lump sum of several $1 million to pay for the retirees. Yes. I want to say it's like 48. Yeah. I think when I calculated it, it was like 23% of our employees are on the plan.
So I think
I asked the same question maybe last year, but I don't remember. So why is it that we can't just take the NERPS people and just put them into PERS? Why can't we just merge it all together?
Because, well, for one, the NERPS plan has much better benefits than PERS. And secondly, PERS won't take them, because I think that was looked at many years ago. So they're grandfathered into these particular benefits, and PERS doesn't, well, obviously, they have a $30 billion problem. They don't want to take on more of a problem. So we have now closed the plan. The plan closed in 2016, but we're responsible for all of the retirees, until they fall off the roll. So that it will just end up being a lump sum that we'll have to pay, because eventually all of the employees will be in PERS, which will be paying for PERS, and then we'll be paying for the retirees for this plan.
So which plan is better? I mean, why couldn't we take everybody that's in PERS and reactivate and put them all into this plan if this one is better?
So I think, I wasn't here at that time when they did all of this analysis, but there's a recruitment piece, because when you move from government to government, it's hard to recruit people when you have your own pension plan. Tigard has done that. Tigard is an example where they are not a PERS employer and they have their own pension plan, but they struggle a lot with recruitment, because a lot of people from another government agency don't want to go there because they don't have PERS. And most government agencies have PERS, so if you switch jobs, you want to stick with a PERS job.
That's your $30 billion problem.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that factor where I think especially for police, because I believe police were the first ones to leave the Newburgh plan, that was a recruitment problem for them. And then it just becomes harder for you to pay for those type of benefits. And that's why PERS has a lower benefit now. This is equivalent to probably more of the tier 2 in PERS, which they don't offer anymore. But you can see on our unfunded actuarial liability here, it is 13.4 million, but this is actually decreased from last year. So our investments that we have for this pension plan are better than PERS. So that's not nothing. That's just the Newburgh pension plan. The other one is 14.1 for PERS. So it would be the combination of both that we, yes. It's a depressing topic. These are two really interesting articles about why PERS has such a problem. How $31,000 yearly salary became $21,000 monthly salary. And then how PERS is still minting millionaires. It's a very interesting article, and that will help explain why PERS is in the position they're in.
One piece of this that some of you don't remember, back in the dot-com days, back in the 80s and 90s, when the employers figured out that if they went back to the running match, it'd be a better deal. They had several years where they got way over 6% return on the money.
Yes.
And PERS, rather than putting that extra money on the side to give to them in later years, they funded it all. They gave them all the money, sometimes as much as 20%, which only made the problem worse in the following year because you got 6% of that.
Yes, you are correct.
And
Yeah. They've now fixed all of that, but yeah, right. Oh, the bond, yes. So in 2004, the city took out a bond for the PERS costs, which almost every entity has also done. I think PERS has said they have 188 PERS bonds expiring the same time ours does in 2028. But basically, the market was at the right time where interest rates were low. And what you could do is you can take out a pension bond and your bond payments or your interest rates on that are going to be far less than what your rate increases were going to be over the 25-year span for PERS, which overall has been very beneficial for us until these last couple of years. And that is because we have a closed NERPS plan. So PERS did not take into account that as people retired or exited from our Newburgh pension plan, those positions become PERS eligible. So our payroll costs have increased more than what they expected over those 25 years. So we're seeing less of a benefit in these last few years of that pension bond. So when that pension bond expires, so will our offset of that. And it should work that your debt payment goes away and it equals out with your offset, but ours is not going to work that way. And they're finding most agencies it's not working that way now either. Yeah.
So would it benefit us to just cancel that bond? I mean, it's gonna end in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Why not just get out of it now? I guess I don't understand what the pluses and minuses would be to do that.
So I don't know that they'll let you get out of it early. I don't know that there's an early buyout option. It is doing a little bit of a rate offset for us. So if we didn't have that, I think our rate increase would have been 9.5%, because it is buying down our rates a little bit. But I think it's going to be next year, or not next year, next biennium, 27, 29, where that falls off. And we'll still have 1 year of a debt payment where it will not be as beneficial for us.
So should we start looking at something like that again in 3 or in 4 years or something? I mean, and if the interest rates are low, then it's a good deal, right?
Yes. And we sort of missed the boat on that because a lot of agencies were doing it in 2020 and 2021. So, but now the interest rates are too high. I mean, we were looking for the urban renewal bond and the interest rate for that was 5.5%. So interest rates now are just not great for borrowing. So, but we'll keep an eye out. When the market is better, it's probably something we would want to hit on. Yeah.
Ever since we've been here, the conditions have been right.
Right.
I feel like we've been talking about this.
I know.
Every year. I think it's good discussion too.
Yeah. Hers is my
Fresh
favorite
enough.
topic. I could talk all day. All their problems. Yeah. One of our other problems that we've sort of run into, or just is sort of on our radar, is attracting and retaining staff. So I heard a lot of this from a conference I went to. So the Oregon government landscape, 31% are eligible to retire within 10 years. 5% are already at retirement age. 50% are already over the age of 50, and only 20% are under the age of 40. So basically what they're saying is it's very difficult to attract younger people to government jobs, which it never used to be. Government jobs used to be a very attractive job, but they're now also seeing that even including benefits, total compensation is approximately 14.5% lower now for public sector employees versus the private sector. And it used to be that benefits and everything used to outweigh all of the, have a public job, it used to come here for the health insurance or the pension. And, now that we see that PERS isn't, what it used to be, it's not attracting a lot of the Gen Z employees like it used to. And the Oregon State Economist said when polled, 68% of people said they felt no loyalty to their current employer and would leave if it offered more money. So, I mean, it's just very interesting. And the number one reason employees under the age of 35 leave is due to compensation shortfalls, which being a government, we don't have a lot of wiggle room on money. So that's where we've tried to get a lot more creative with the 410 flexibility and just other things that we can offer to attract a lot of, people when money is not something that we can offer as a government. and just continue to offer the benefits that we do. So far, we haven't had too many of that. We've had a lot of higher numbers for our recruitments. So we haven't seen a lot of impact on this, but it's just something that is on the mind of a lot of government agencies. And then, of course, all of our massive capital projects. There's just been a lot of projects that have been put off for the last 50 years that are now to the point where they need to be dealt with. The one that you've heard us talk about a lot is the groundwater treatment plant, which we are expecting to be around 30 to 46 million. We're still looking at ways for funding for this. The oxidation ditch is another one you'll see in the budget. We budgeted that right now for 17.5 million. However, there's been some new developments with that, and we're waiting for a clarifier report to come out this fall, which the number could be vastly different and more like 30 million. So we're not quite sure on that one. That's why there's a big asterisk next to that. So we'll see. And then, of course, we have the HB 2001, which is state mandated for pipe replacement, which is 6.6 million. We wish we didn't have to spend all of our water funds on that because we have a new plant to build, but it's state mandated. And then, of course, River Street is approximately $8 million, which we're also going to supplement with some of our street SDC funds. Okay, I'm going to move on to common assumptions in the forecast. So for the COLA increases, I put asterisks next to the ones that are already bargained. And then for the years, the 2 years out that aren't bargained, I went with 3% across the board, just because the CPIU right now is 2.9%. So 3% seemed like a fair thing to apply across the board. And then for some of our other expenditures, health insurance was another one we got hit hard with this year. That was a 10% increase. And that was largely to the Providence dispute with Regents. So we'll see how that goes in the future. We're expecting that to not be small increases again. So we've forecasted that out to be 7% each year. And just for reference, in FY26, a family plan is going to cost around $34,000 per person. So it's a huge benefit that we give for our employees on that. Pension costs, PERS, we already know is going to be a 6% increase. And then we forecasted out 4.5% for the following 27-29 biennium. That's really unknown. So I'll be watching the advisory rates to see what they think that's going to be and watching the market closely. For our NERPS plan, we know next year it'll be 4.2%, and then that is very volatile depending on how many people retire. So that could be upwards of 7%. So that's what's in the forecast. Then for materials and services, I've just analyzed past spending patterns for each department. And then for capital outlay, that's based on each department's capital rollover plans that they've submitted. And then for other expenditures, inflation, CPIU right now, this one was a really hard one to predict, but right now it's sitting at 3%. So that is what I went with in the forecast. That could be wrong, but it's really hard to know where that one's going. So we went with 3%. The Federal Reserve has also indicated they have no desire to cut interest rates. So I also went with that assumption that our interest income is going to remain pretty steady throughout the forecast. Again, that could be wrong, but it's hard to know on that one. And then we'll move into the forecast. So I've taken this out an extra year. So there's 4 years in the forecast, and we'll go through these fund by fund. Yes.
So a top level takeaway is this is the first year that we did a 4-year forecast to make sure we thought we were liquid for 4 years, and we are. But also another takeaway is
You're
that,
skipping ahead.
yeah, sorry, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. But no, I was just going to say, but net, our cost of employees has gone up by 9% per year for 3 years.
Yes, and that's mostly because of PERS and the health insurance, not because of COLA. But it's good to know because those are costs that really hit us hard. Okay, so back to the general fund. For revenue assumptions on the property taxes, again, we took a conservative approach. We did assume the 3% allowed by charter. And then we also assumed a 2 to 3% addition to that for growth each year. That's hard to know. That's generally what we've gotten, except for this year where we got 9% and we don't know why, but we'll take it because that's great. But we're not expecting that any other year. Franchise fees, 5%, just because that's what we have on the contracts. Our state shared revenues, this one has been a little bit depressing also from the state. They're seeing big decreases in liquor taxes, which means people aren't out drinking. So, I mean, come on, people. We need our state shared revenues. So anyway, I have that decreasing and then very small 1 to 2% increases thereafter. And then cigarette taxes have been flat for a very long time, so that's what we're forecasting here. Marijuana taxes have been about 5 to 6% each year, so that's what we've planned for this. For community development, we are expecting this to be very little, so there's a slight increase over the next 4 years due to minimal development that we're predicting. And same for the planning and subdivision fees. We got a lot more than we were expecting this year, but we're not expecting that to continue on. So there'll be less that we predicted next year, but gradually increasing just based on minimal planning development. And then for the Dundee and police communication contract, that's a 5% each year per the agreement. Traffic fines, there's a slight increase over the next 4 years, just in line with historical trends. The school district SRO contract, that new contract's been signed, and that's also earmarked for debt reduction. The photo red light, we've budgeted for $250,000 each year. That's also earmarked for debt reduction. Traffic school, we've seen slight increases just due to the red light cameras we're anticipating. That just more citations just equals more people potentially eligible for traffic school. And then sale of asset, some of that is earmarked for debt reduction because that will include the Butler property sale. Other sale of assets, we generally have like vehicle sales and stuff. So we've also included what we anticipate for that. And then TLT, we've seen that kind of become more stagnant over the last year or two. So we're expecting minimal increases, which I think we put about 4% in there for each year. For the expenses, oh yeah, go ahead. I didn't because we weren't sure exactly when we were going to start receiving TLT for that. But then you said we were having the ribbon cutting, so then yesterday you said the ribbon cutting was, yeah, so does not include. No. No. Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, if remote occupancy exposed to the Addison, there are variables.
Yeah. But it's hard to know on TLT, so we just went conservative on that. Yeah. The capital rollover funds, those were based on the department saving plans they submitted. Transfers out to debt service. So this one, we're going to have a big chunk on 1 year when we're expecting to pay off that communication tower debt for the debt reduction plan. Contingency, we just want some of our general reserves to be above 2 million. Future positions we've added to the model. So I mentioned before the one FTE for entry-level police officer as part of the succession planning, that's starting FY 25-26. Then we have two more that we've added to the model as part of the succession planning in FY 28-29, so at the very end of the model. And then we have 1.75 code compliance officer starting in FY 27-28. So as you can see, we do pretty well here. We do take a little bit of a dip on that year where we pay off the debt and have the dispatchers move into the general fund. But for the most part, we remain flat after that, even adding those extra officers in that last year where we're trying to staff up a little bit before the retirement. And every year we stay above the 20% of operating revenues. So overall, I think we look like we're doing pretty well. And especially since most of the revenue predictions were on the conservative side. So I honestly feel pretty good about where the general fund is sitting. Do you guys have any questions on the general fund before I move on? Yeah,
So Will, I mean, I've heard you say that. I'm not saying that you're lying or anything. I'm just saying, what?
uh-oh.
Well, I mean, somebody could take it that way, and that's not what I'm meaning. What I'm saying is, when you're going around and meeting other city managers and stuff, are you hearing them talk a lot about the woes that they're facing in their budgeting, or maybe Katie and your group
Yes.
sphere of people? I mean, they're pretty free to voice their opinion about that kind of stuff? Instead of like keeping it quiet, we don't want people to know what's going on.
I'll say my little bit first. Most of it that I have heard has been PERS. They weren't expecting this massive increase, which we were. I mean, I never believed the actuary. So I was expecting it to be more than what he said. So we were good there. But that has been a big woe from a lot of places I've heard where the PERS rates have just killed us. Secondly, which I think you're probably going to touch on, ARPA funds were used for staffing, and then all of a sudden ARPA funds are spent and they have all this extra staff that they can't pay for. So that's also been a woe that we've heard from other cities.
And to those couple of points, I'll also add that we work harder than they do. So we all wear more hats than a lot of these cities do, and we have a wider span of control. So we'll have one of our managers might manage 6 or 7 people. One of their managers might manage 3 or 4 people. So from 2022 onwards throughout the organization, we worked hard to keep the organization as lean as possible because Katie predicted some of the problems that were coming, and we did not use any ARPA money for operating revenue because we could see what was coming.
All right, we'll move on to Administrative Services Fund. For the internal revenues that come from all the departments, we're anticipating around a 5 to 8% increase each year. That's pretty standard from what we've been doing. And these are all just based on departmental needs. We do see a little bit of an increase when we take on the HR manager and some of the HR costs that we have upcoming, which I'll talk about on the next slide, actually. Yeah, the HR department. We have a little bit larger increases that you'll see in the budget this year. That's due to the new personnel, which I talked about. And then we have some additional money earmarked in there for recruitment of the HR manager since we've had 4 unsuccessful recruitments in the past. So we believe that's probably necessary to use an outside recruitment firm this time. And then we also have money because it's time to do another class and comp before we do bargaining again. So there'll be some extra funds in there for that this time again. And then you'll see emergency management is a new department we've created. So this used to be commingled in the public works funds. And then we decided it just made more sense for it to be in central services and have its own department. And then facilities department, we've included the new landscaping contract. So you'll see an increase there. Insurance and PLC claims, we've modeled 7%, but actually we had really good news for Brown and Brown. Do you want to talk about that, Will?
So we were told that it was looking like our rate of increase was gonna be a lot lower than 7%, perhaps as low as, what was it, 4 or 5%?
I think, yeah, he said 4 or 5.
Yeah, and that's because our loss rate compared to a basket of other cities has been substantially lower. So that's vehicle wrecks haven't happened,
Workers' comp,
workers' comp, safety claims,
yeah.
and no HR lawsuits.
Yeah, so even giving the flood and all the money they've had to pay for that, we were really shocked to hear that that was not going to be astronomical, because they said that they've been telling some cities that they were going to have 25% increases. So we were like very happy to hear. Yeah, so this was good news. He told us this last Friday, so I was like, do I have to go fix the budget? But luckily it was good news, so we didn't, no fixing needed. And then future positions, again, the HR manager, we have budgeted that for that to come on beginning of FY 26-27. A new HR generalist to start mid-year on FY 26-27. And then a policy analyst we're hoping to have added, or Will's hoping to have added, in FY 27-28. January, yeah. Yeah, Allison's strategy with that was to get the manager on, and then the manager will be able to hire a generalist and help figure out the new duties of people. So that was why it was a mid-year hire. So admin services, this one doesn't need a lot of reserves in it, so it should generally fluctuate between 200 and 600,000, just because it's just central shared costs from every other department. So honestly, this looks fine. And if it needed more fund balance, you would just pull more expenses from the other funds that contribute to the central services. So overall, this works out fine. Move on to the street fund. Gas tax revenue, this is no shock because we've been hearing this every year. The state's projecting 0 to 1% increase. So that's what we've put in the forecast for the next 4 years. Wish it was more, but so far they haven't figured out a solution for the gas tax problem. And then for TUF, the rates are already set to increase 4% in 26 from rate review. And so we've just assumed 4% thereafter on that. And there's substantial reserves in the TUF right now that we have a plan to spend down, which you'll see in the forecast here. Oh, street expenditures, those are going to remain fairly status quo, just because we're continuing to recover our funds in the gas tax portion of the street fund. And then capital outlay, we've added back to the budget the vehicle maintenance purchases, which we had to cut last year. So we've been able to add back some funds for that. And then pavement preservation for TUF, that's still the main focus for the next 4 years. And you'll see lots of TUF projects that we've got planned to do, and you'll see a dip in our fund balance, which in this case is a good thing because we're using up all of the TUF money. So you can see we kind of go up and then we have a pretty big dip when all of those TUF projects are starting to be completed. Which Will can tell you more about the TUF projects if you want to hear it. He's ready. All right, I'll move on. Wastewater. So again, 3.5% was set by rate review for FY 26. And so I just assumed 3.5 for the rest of the years in the forecast. Other fees that we have in wastewater are for our sewer system for dumping, that we have accounts that use that for that purpose. So I have assumed 3 to 3.5% for the next 4 years, and compost sales to remain flat. Yeah. Oh, yes.
So do we have a lot of like customers or whatever that use our sewer service where they're dumping?
Yes.
I mean, Is it more than just people driving through in a motorhome that need someplace to dump? Is it bigger than just those type of people, or?
I don't know. That would be a question for Russ. So when we talk about that, ask that question for him. I only see the dollar amount. So I'm not 100% sure who's all using that, but I know we do have a fair amount of motorhomes who use it. And we do have actually a contract for, porta potties who come and use it. Yeah. Yeah. Debt payments. So again, wastewater has one of our huge debts that we have to still pay off. So I've updated the principal and interest to the forecast based on the amortization schedules. Transfers out for capital projects is based on the CIP plan that Will and Travis have created. And you'll see the fund balance in this one rapidly decrease because of the oxidation ditch, which again, that number may not be right now, but we won't know till the fall. I&I work is a big focus for maintenance over the next 4 years. And for new personnel that we've added to the model, we have one operator one that's split across all of the utility funds that we're hoping to start in FY 27-28. So you can see because of the oxidation ditch, we take a pretty big dip. But we never go below that minimum fund balance target, which if you want to know what's in that, I can tell you. I have that written down. Yeah, it's around 7.5 million on that. And included in that minimum fund balance target, it's 60 days of operating costs for personnel and materials and services. 1 year of debt service payments, equipment replacement based on the forecasted needs, 5% of your annual user fees, and 2% of asset value or their depreciation value. So those total is what is recommended for a minimum fund balance for a utility fund. So you can see we get right up to it, but we have about $1 million buffer. Still, it's hard to see on the graph, but we still would do fine cash funding the oxidation ditch, assuming it's only 17.5 million, which may not be true now. We don't know. Assumptions for water, we assume a 5% increase for 2025. That was based on rate review, and we're assuming 5% thereafter. And all other revenues, we're expecting around a 2% increase for that. Transfers out for capital projects, again, are all based on the CIP plan. And our largest project we have is the state mandated HB 2001. And then for personnel and materials and services, we're trying to keep these as low as possible just because we want to save cash for the groundwater treatment plant that we have in the future. And for the debt service, we have the 2015 refunding bond will be paid off in 25-26, so next fiscal year, which will free up some of our SDC money. And then the effluent reuse loan will be paid off in 27-28. So there is some light in the tunnel here with the water fund. And so once we finish those HB 2001 projects, then you see we remain pretty flat over the next few years. So we're hoping to be able to keep this fund balance where it's at and maybe even increase it to keep earning money for the water plant in the future. Stormwater user fees, again, rate review set 6.5%, and then we've assumed the same for all the years thereafter. And we expect all of the other revenue to remain flat. Again, transfers out are all based on the CIP projects. The largest project we have is West Franklin Storm. And we're trying to keep our personnel costs on here as low as possible just because we have a lot of CIP projects for stormwater and we want to cash fund them. So you can see we do a lot of CIP projects here and we get quite low and then we come back up once we finish West Franklin Storm. So overall, I think this is looking fine and we're still well above the minimum target fund balance for stormwater. For the building fund, we're expecting very small increases over the next 4 years to be in line with the planning permits that we've been expecting, just because planning and building are gonna be slower over the next several years. And so we've expected that for building, plumbing, and the city contracts, which are for building inspections for Dundee. And for personnel, materials, and services, we redistributed the community development director's salary. So he had a really large portion in planning and a really small portion in building, which didn't really make sense because he equally oversees both departments. So we split his salary up a little bit more equitably based on his time. So you'll see that on the forecast. And then one new personnel that was added to the model, if it's necessary, was a building inspector 1 to be added in FY 27-28. Yeah, if things were to pick up. And you can see the fund balance here kind of declines over the years. That's mostly just because there's not a lot of building activity that we're expecting. I would expect the fund balance to be a little bit more flat if we don't add that extra building inspector. So it's in there just in case it's needed, but if there's not a lot of extra activity, it's probably not a necessary hire. The 911 tax revenue, so this is part of the state shared revenue for having dispatch. The state has told us we expect 9% next year. And so we've assumed in the forecast 5% after that for every year, just because that's historically closer to what we've gotten. And for expenses, this pays for 3 communication officers. So you can see this fund is pretty steady here. It doesn't need a lot of reserves just because it only funds 3 employees. So it just needs a pretty small buffer there for a fund balance. So overall, this is pretty much all we would need in this fund. So it maintains a pretty steady fund balance. The public safety fee fund. So we have 2 fees in this fund. The public safety fee, which pays for 3 officers. And that's paid on the municipal billing statement. The resolution links this to the CPIU West. So we forecasted 2.8%, which is what the CPIU West is now. And we've assumed 3% all the years thereafter. And then for the communication officer fee, that funds 2 officers, 2 dispatch officers, which is also paid on the water bill. And we have forecasted, again, the 2.8% and 3% thereafter. Now, we're assuming the debt reduction plan will be successful, so we've removed this fee beginning July 1, 2026, so FY 26-27. So we only have 1 year of revenue for this. And again, oh yes. It'll probably come back to council to be reevaluated. Well, I think that we're hoping to, because our plan is to have the cameras up and running and generating revenue by this July. That's how we've set it up in the RFP. So then it'll have an entire fiscal year to have made 250,000, which I think is possible based on the citation numbers we've seen. That's right. Make a donation to the city through a citation. Yeah. Increase your drinking for the liquor tax. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, anyway, I think we covered this slide. So you can see here, the fund balance goes down, but that's because we've removed the 2 communication officers from the fund. So with that goes their fund balance, and then it just remains flat thereafter because it just has the police officers in there. That's it for the forecast. Does anybody have any questions on the forecast before I move on? Yeah, we factored that in on the materials and services for the expenses that we were expecting when I went through on all the departmental budgets on that. We factored all of that stuff in. No, I think I had said on here, materials and services, I put in based on historic spending and what I'm expecting for the spending. Yes, that slide.
So when the departments fill in their budget change requests.
Yeah.
Line items, the utility. Yeah. They have to estimate.
Yeah,
9%.
yeah, I analyzed past spending patterns for each of the department and future spending needs. So I definitely took that in consideration because I know PG is planning on going up quite a bit. Thanks, Rachel. Now, do you know how to magically get forward? Oh, wow. Yeah. This is like a magic trick. All right, so transition to the biennial budget. So you'll see in your budget document, which will come to you guys Friday. We have moved to a biennial budget and it will look a little bit different. It'll look the same, but a little bit different. So we have just one column for the proposed budget that will be both years combined. So it will be a little bit harder to look at because it won't be quite as comparable to last year because last year is just 1 year. So just know that you'll see and it'll look, whoa, that's a huge number. Well, it's times 2. Yes, and in some instances, it'll be times 2 plus a little bit more, which departments will be ready to explain because that will be their change requests that they've asked for. So I also wanted to point out beginning fund balance and contingencies, you only show in 1 year value. So when you're looking at the fund balance, that will be comparable as will contingency because you never want to budget 2 years ahead of a fund balance when you don't necessarily have it. Same as a reserve. So just know that when you're looking at it, that part might be confusing, that those are 1 year numbers, everything else is a 2 year number. And we still use the same BCR process with departments, and departments will be ready to explain any of their changes on that. So if you need, yes, go ahead. Yes.
So in
No, it's like Peggy had a
2022, we added a process that I invented called the BCR process. It's the budget change request process. Each department does not get any increase to any line item without a written justification on a BCR form. And then we sit down together, we go through every single form, and we either approve or we deny the request based upon its reasonableness and the evidence that underpins it.
So if you have any questions on anything, departments will be ready to explain their changes, but it will be a little bit hard this year to compare it to last year when looking at it because it'll be 2 years versus 1. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody.
I'm assuming after a year, you'll have supplemental, but
Yes.
why wouldn't we keep 2 columns? People don't deal with it every day. Back to how much we expected to spend that year.
I think from what I've heard from other cities, a big purpose of moving to the biennial budget was more of a fluid transition for the budget. So they have both of their years. So like for the CIP, for example, it's hard to predict what's going to be spent in 1 year. And so this way you just have 2 years and most of the projects can be completed in 2 years. So they might spend more than half of that in 1 year, and that's fine. And so when you look at it at the budget, they might spend 3/4 of that in 1 year, and it doesn't matter because they have that whole amount to spend in that whole 2-year given period. Yeah, yes,
So for example, let's say that we're very lucky and the price of bitumen or something or tar materials is a little better in the first year. We might accelerate our purchasing to lean into that advantage. Or if we feel that we can finish a project quicker than having a full 18 or 19 months, we're going to do that because it might mean less subcontractor labor being spent on the project. But by having a 2-year combined window, it just gives us more flexibility to do whatever we can do within those 2 years and not have it roll over into the next period.
yeah, so that was why it was shown in just the 2-year together increment. But I do see where that would be helpful for you as a counselor.
Not opposed to your
Yeah,
budget. I think it's better for us.
yeah, yeah. And probably when I come with the supplemental budget at the end of year 1, I could probably have some sort of report for that to try and bridge the gap on that. It just, the actual budget document probably won't have that, but I do see where that would be helpful for council to have. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure there's something that I could have to help bridge that, to make it easier for reviewing. So I'll work on that. Probably, but I do believe that we're planning on having a budget committee mid-year. So on that off year, we do want to hold the budget committee meeting just to get everybody back up to speed on where we're at and any changes that we're making with the supplemental, just for transparency and input from the budget committee. So yes, the supplemental will probably go to council, but we will include all of the budget committee on those changes.
I've seen this place where capital outlay show when they're planning spending.
I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure exactly, because CIP, I know that that was something we just have a hard time pinning down between year 1 and year 2, because things can rapidly move quickly or they can move very slowly. So I know that that might be something that's hard with CIP, or it could just be wrong. And that's why we do a lot of supplemental budgets now, where you'll see with the fund balance, oh, fund balance increased $3 million. Well, that's because all these CIP projects just didn't happen in the time that we thought.
So if it's hard to plan and to keep a CIP project inside 1 year, it's a bit easier to do it in 2.
Yeah,
But it's hard to say exactly where those invoices will land, as you know, within the 24-month cycle. So we're still really, although we do have to do, of course, a mid-year check-in and we have to do budget adjustments because things happen, it's still more flexible to have a 2-year span of time for our planning and for our expenditures and try to get them, except for the very largest ones, to not need to roll into a second biennium. Now, your river streets, your oxidation ditches,
Yeah.
things like that, they're going to roll into a second biennium. They're not going to be done in 2 years.
those are not a 2-year project. So future budget meetings. So we have 3 meetings scheduled. We have the April 29th, where we're going to talk about the general fund, admin services, and then the 3 public safety fees, or safety funds, 3, 13, and 16. We have May 6th, where we're going to talk about emergency management, fleet and facilities, the public works funds, and then all of the community development funds. And then for the May 13th meeting, we have, the miscellaneous funds like debt service, TLT, the library foundation or library gift and memorial, I mean. And then the capital projects, the SDCs. And then that's the meeting where we'll approve the budget, talk about the property tax, and approve the property tax rate.
So May sixth is the day that we expect to be discussing the favorite topic of this budget committee.
Of compost.
Yes.
Yes. We were just talking about that, yes. Compost is a fan favorite. I'll make sure Russ is prepared. Yeah, yeah. I'll make sure Russ is ready for that. Yes.
Since we won't get our budget books until Friday, is this schedule in there so we'll know? I won't remember what to study for next week if I.
I'll email this.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll send an email.
Okay.
And then, yes, again, the budget will be released to the committee on the 25th. We're gonna have that delivered to your house, so you don't have to worry about trying to pick it up from City Hall. And then for those 3 budget meetings, if you have any really specific questions, if you could submit them the day before, that way we can think about it and get the right people to answer those questions. If it's just general questions like you guys have here, that's totally fine, but sometimes there can be oddball questions where you're like, you know, what's this FTE made up or whatever.
It's complicated, so don't play dumb.
Yeah.
Send it in advance.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's it. I didn't go too long tonight. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
That's why we don't know what the inflation number is gonna do.
Right.
We don't know what the market's gonna do. There's a tremendous amount of we don't know about.
Yes. It's really hard to do a forecast when you don't know. So yeah, so we just go with it. But if things change, we'll change with them, I guess. Yeah. Yes, good news is things are looking
Changing
good.
winds adjust ourselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so that's all I have. Do you guys have any other questions?
I have one question. We
Yes.
just learned tonight that we had a deficit on the, repair of the city hall of almost $500,000. Where does that money come from? It was not budgeted.
Actually, we used all of our facilities budget, so it was budgeted. Poor Preston just didn't get a budget.
Sorry.
We did have a budget in the facilities budget in, Fund 31. It's just, Preston usually gets to do other things with that money, like other repairs at City Hall. So we told him he couldn't do any repairs until we knew the final number of the flood. And then it used the entire budget, so he didn't do any other repairs at City Hall this year. Yeah. Yes.
Just to add to that point, CIS couldn't believe that we got back into City Hall for that cheaper price. And every other case of other buildings, there were multiple times that much money spent. So we managed to get this done for the price of just our regular facilities budget. We
Yes.
didn't overspend the facilities budget. Now, we didn't do any other repairs on any other buildings. So we went a year without other building repairs.
Yes. So it was in the budget. We just didn't get to use that for other things around the city. So we felt lucky that we, were neutral on that. So that was good. It would be in Fund 31. So I believe it's, in Department 5164. If you look, it's in the Facilities Department. I can show you when we're done.
Katie, can I expect then Fund 31 for this year to be a little bit more beefier to catch up with everything that was not able to do that? No.
No.
Okay.
I have not heard much on the FEMA. Have you heard much on the FEMA? Yeah.
That there was some talk about perhaps about $500,000, maybe. But that would be for enhancements. It's things that the insurance carrier would not cover, which we would have liked them to have covered. That was including improvements and replacements of windows for higher R value and a roof that would increase the value in order to mitigate this from ever happening again. Now, I have done a jury rig Band-Aid solution in the meantime, which is we figured out how to have a hand portable pump and an alarm system if we have a power outage at the same time as a freeze. I or some other staff member are going to go over and drain out the water from the sprinkler system so that we cannot repeat that. But it's a hand portable pump that we can use to pump the sump out if we have to empty that. And I'll be shown how to do it once, but I'll be honest, it's too complicated to remember. So we're going to build a card that has it step by step how to do it. If we have a hard freeze and at the same time we have a power outage, because it's the combination that is the risk factor. Now, if we get better R value for the building, then we won't have to worry about this as much anymore. And so that's why we're hoping on the FEMA money.
Any other questions? Hearing none, then we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting today. Thank you
Awesome.
so much. You did a great job.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.